Tonight on Bridge City News, Lethbridge police have made an arrest in the drive-by paintball shooting at the city's supervised consumption site. A Calgary clinic is offering a new technology aimed at helping those with brain injuries rewire neural connections. And police in Vancouver say their gang problem is unusual because so many members come from middle-class and high-income family homes.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. A Lethbridge man has been arrested in connection with the drive-by paintball shooting at the supervised consumption site over the weekend. Lethbridge police have charged 29-year-old Jesse John James Bullman with 3 counts of assault with a weapon and 1 count each of possession of a weapon dangerous to the public and mischief to property.
Several interviews were conducted, which formulated our grounds for arrest of Mr. Bullman. He was arrested at his residence without incident, and he's been very cooperative with us to this point. Mr. Bullman has taken full responsibility for his actions and has offered his deepest apologies to the victims in this tragic event. The last thing we want is any type of vigilante action, as nothing positive can come from that, as we've seen from this event.
Police said multiple tips from the public helped identify the suspect who was arrested at his home yesterday without incident. Police are investigating as to whether alcohol was a factor. Bullman is currently in custody, awaiting a release hearing. A police chase near Taber, Alberta over the weekend ended up sending 2 people to hospital. Early Sunday morning, Taber police noticed a swerving vehicle and tried to pull it over, but the driver then accelerated and crashed into the center meridian, rolling the vehicle several times. A 21-year-old Medicine Hat man was airlifted to Calgary in critical condition, while a 23-year-old woman was transported to the Lethbridge Hospital in serious condition. The investigation also discovered that the truck was stolen earlier that morning. A Lethbridge trial that was supposed to conclude in June, but had to be extended, got underway once again today and is expected to finish soon, perhaps by the end of this week. The high-profile trial for David and Colette Stefan, who were charged more than 6 years ago with failing to provide the necessaries of life to their 18-month-old toddler, today focused on the qualifications of former Alberta Chief Medical Examiner Annie Savageau.
Having Dr. Annie Savageau come on stand for us and be admitted as an expert and be able to give her opinion as to what actually took place with Ezekiel is extremely important. Because what it does, it diffuses the narrative of bacterial meningitis that would be accompanied by severe symptoms that we as parents, myself and Colette, did not see with Ezekiel. And so it's extremely important that she be qualified as an expert and that she's able to give her testimony in regard to what actually caused Ezekiel's passing and basically qualify what me and Colette actually saw in real life with Ezekiel that didn't alarm us to the point of taking him to a doctor.
Nurses, teachers, and government workers in Lethbridge have expressed anger towards the province's Bill 9. The controversial bill defers wage arbitration talks for 180,000 union workers until October 31st. Alberta's Minister of Labour and Immigration, Jason Copping, weighed in on the concerns of protesters.
Well, again, the government's decision to delay wage arbitrations, our view is a sort of responsible and measured approach. This is simply a delay. It's not a change. And the reason that we're doing it because we wanted to understand the province's economic picture, right? And the purpose of the temporary delay is to give the government an opportunity to receive the input from the McKinnon panel, right? So we can make an informed decision going forward with a good picture of our finances. And I also wanted to say, we greatly appreciate the contribution our public sector employees do to the province, but it would be irresponsible for us not to have a really good understanding of our fiscal situation before moving forward in terms of discussion and potential arbitrations.
Copping also addressed a panel that has been created by the provincial government that will discuss the possibility of lowering wages for alcohol servers.
And the purpose of the panel is twofold. One is to publish economic data related to the minimum wage changes made by the previous government and what were the impacts in terms of income, earnings, hours worked, employment and unemployment, and also income distribution. And then the second purpose of the panel is to look at and assess whether a wage differential for hospitality industry workers who serve alcohol could lead to higher net incomes by allowing people to work more hours or not. And so we included two economists, both academics, one from the University of Alberta and one from the University of Waterloo, industry representatives, business representatives, and then people who work in the liquor serving industry and are currently that's their job.
In May, the UCP government cut the minimum wage for workers who are under 18. Premier Jason Kenney calls the changes a common sense approach to allow businesses to hire more young workers. According to Statistics Canada, Alberta has purchased more legal cannabis than any other province. From legalization in October of 2018 to June of 2019, Alberta cannabis suppliers have rung up $123.6 million in sales. Ontario and Quebec were second and third with sales of roughly $121 and $119 million respectively. That number is set to increase with 50 new cannabis stores opening up this fall. Bridge Bud Supply in Lethbridge will be opening up a few more stores in southern Alberta. They stress the importance of education.
Pincher Creek is going to be opened up by the end of November. Same thing with Claresholm. We have Fort Macleod, we've got Vulcan, and Tabor also on deck as well too. So we're going to southern Alberta, smaller markets. That's where we'll be opening up. I thought it was going to be like the pitchfork, like, oh my gosh, but no, there was a lot of people that were, they're really interested in the product themselves, and just an overall basis of how to use it is kind of the biggest thing that they're asking us, because they don't know that CBD has no head-high effects, so they weren't informed on that aspect. So us being able to go out there and actually talk to them about what it does and how it works for them was a big relief for them, and they've actually talked to us about coming in to the store and seeing exactly what a cannabis retail store looked like, because they don't have anything out there. So they're excited, and we're excited to have them in here.
Canada is set to legalize edible cannabis products on October 17th. And speaking of which, pot brownies may be stronger than you think. A new study finds chocolate appears to interfere with the ability to measure THC, the high-inducing chemical in marijuana. That means THC levels on some edible cannabis product labels may not be accurate.
We are going to test it for potency and see if indeed it passes. My research has focused on cannabis-infused chocolates, specifically relating to trends in the sample prep and how it relates to the potency readings that we record. I would say the takeaway is that the presence of chocolate in the vial can interfere with our ability to accurately test the amount of THC in that product, and that can be a negative for the consumer and for the producer. The chocolate bar might in reality have more cannabinoids than the lab finds, and thus the product might actually be overdosed when it gets to the consumer's hands. There is a possibility that the customer might feel too high, but on the whole, the actual effect is probably not enough that it would make the difference between somebody having a good experience or needing to go to the emergency room. I don't think that this causes a substantial health risk to consumers, but I do think that it might affect their confidence they have in the legal market, and thus this science is important to establish the scientific legitimacy of the cannabis industry in its nascent days.
I think it will bring confidence to the whole industry, because we're starting to learn more about what's really going on, and now we're testing chocolate the right way to get the right values out of the matrix. So I'm more optimistic than pessimistic about it.
Alberta's police watchdog has been called to investigate an officer-involved shooting in Calgary. Calgary police say in a news release that officers were called to a shopping complex parking lot earlier yesterday for a report of a threatening man with a bat. Police say the situation escalated and the man was shot by police, but they say he failed to comply with demands and officers used additional force to take him into custody. They say a large machete-type knife was recovered at the scene. A Calgary clinic is offering new technology aimed at helping those with brain injuries rewire neural connections. The portable neuromodulation stimulator sits on the surface of the tongue and delivers mild, high-frequency electrical impulses while the patient undergoes an intense regimen of daily physiotherapy.
PONS is a device and a technology that provides neuromodulation, which is stimulation that sits on the tongue, and it helps to change and improve the communication between the brain and the body. And what we're hoping that this technology will do is to create the neuroplastic changes needed to redirect, regenerate, and potentially grow the communication channels between the brain and the body. It actually feels like Pop Rocks. For those of us old enough to remember what that's like, it's like Pop Rocks, maybe with a can of Coke on top of it, so it can get pretty intense, but that's what it feels like, kind of a tingling and popping sensation in your mouth. Right now, the PONS device is approved for use in Canada for mild to moderate traumatic brain injuries, and what we're hoping to focus on is gait, balance, and coordination for people living with the mild to moderate traumatic brain injury. There are other clinics offering this device in Canada, so in BC and Ontario and Quebec, and we're the only clinic in Alberta and the only country in the world actually that is able to implement this clinically. Isaac has been following this technology and this device for a long, long time. He has sought this technology. He has come to us to work throughout his journey to see if this will improve his ability to function.
I have MS, yeah. I was diagnosed in 2011. Your form needs to be as good as possible, and that's what the therapists here are doing. Like, they're just correcting my gait when I was on the treadmill, like making recommendations about what I needed to change there. And then I did a balance portion first for about 20 minutes, and it was actually really challenging for me. I'm really hoping to just improve my mobility in any way. Right now I can walk for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then I need a break. If I can walk for like an hour or whatever, that would actually change my life quite a bit. Like, I'd be able to do a lot more activities with my friends and family.
That does look very promising. Manitoba's election campaign shifted into N for negative over the weekend, with the Progressive Conservatives and the NDP attacking each other's leaders. The PCs issued a news release that restated nuggets of NDP leader Wab Kiinu's past, while the NDP fired back on Sunday by detailing the number of days PC leader Brian Pallister spent at his vacation home in Costa Rica. The Liberals, meanwhile, promised more infrastructure spending to make up for what it calls an infrastructure deficit left by the PC government as well as NDP governments that preceded them. The gang conflict in British Columbia's Lower Mainland is unlike any other in North America. Many young members are not driven by poverty, but instead come from middle-class homes. Surrey RCMP are working to prevent kids from joining gangs and enforce the law against those already involved in the dangerous lifestyle. Sergeant Mike Sanchez, head of the Surrey RCMP Gang Enforcement Unit, says gang members here span socioeconomic classes and are getting younger and younger.
We started really noticing that the trend, up until about 6-7 years ago, the average age of people that were being killed on in the gang conflict, or people that were being involved in gang conflict, was usually about 24, 25 years old. That wasn't uncommon. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, we started to notice a shift where it was starting to dip below the ages of 19 and 18. So it was getting dangerously close to youth. And then just over the course of the last 13 years, we've had a lot of young people that have been victimized or been a statistic because of the gang violence. I really believe that the lifestyle is really being promoted through social media images. It's disturbing when you start seeing 13, 14-year-olds really using social media as a platform to express themselves. And that expression, what we've seen recently, is through guns and money and drugs and just all types of inappropriate things for that age. When you talk to a lot of these individuals, or individuals that we monitor in the community, and you ask them and you take a look at where their backgrounds are and their families, there's not really a reason why they got involved in it, other than the pure fact that they think it's cool. Some of our most notable gangsters come from families that really, they come from well-to-do families where it shouldn't be an option. Education's paid for. Their options are there. Schooling's there, right? Job opportunities are there that have even been created by their parents. When we talk to these individuals, we always leave them with the option that they can get out. We do have a gang exiting strategy in this province. So our hopes is really reaching out and understanding where the young people are at before they're introduced to those images, or even the proposal that lifestyle is good for them. And we want to get the messaging to them early enough so that they have the education, they have the tools to make that decision right then and there.
People's Party of Canada leader Maxime Bernier says his political opponents and a, quote, totalitarian leftist mob want to stifle talk about immigration and keep him out of the election debates. Bernier is complaining of censorship after Pattison Outdoor Advertising received a flood of complaints from the public and decided it would take down billboards promoting his controversial stance on immigration. The billboards are paid for by the True North Strong and Free Advertising Corporation. The federal Conservatives are putting their hopes in a star candidate for the riding of Rivière-du-Nord, north of Montreal. Former Olympic synchronized swimming gold medalist Sylvie Frechette will be the Conservative Party candidate as she tries to unseat Bloc Québécois MP Réal Fortin in a riding where the Conservatives finished fourth in the last federal election. Canada is going to send water bombers to help fight fires raging in the Amazon rainforest. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made the announcement as the G7 summit wrapped up in Biarritz, France yesterday. French President Emmanuel Macron says the G7 has agreed to an immediate $20 million fund to help Amazon countries fight wildfires, as well as to launch a long-term global initiative to protect the rainforest. Meanwhile, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro is tweeting that the G7 agreement treats the region like a colony. Disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein entered a not guilty plea in a Manhattan courtroom this morning to an indictment that adds 2 new charges of predatory sexual assault to his upcoming trial. Prosecutors say it will lay the legal foundation for Sopranos star actress Annabella Sciorra to testify that Weinstein raped her in 1993. Weinstein's attorneys have characterized the prosecution's case as weak.
Today was a good day for Mr. Weinstein. I think it shows the strength of our case, frankly, that the DA ran to the grand jury in the 11th hour. I think these new charges show that they are desperate in the facts that they believe that they're going to put forth. We just received a copy of the indictment. We will review it. We plan on filing many motions attempting to, again, dismiss these counts. I'm going to have to look at it and see. So we just received the copy. We're going to see what the new indictment shows versus what the former indictment shows, and then we will make our proper motions. We are going to file motions to dismiss this new indictment, and we believe we will be successful.
I'm also announcing right now that I also represent Annabella Sciorra. Annabella has done what anyone who has information which is relevant to the prosecution of Harvey Weinstein or any prosecution should do. She provided that information to law enforcement. As a result, she was asked by the prosecution to testify in this criminal case against Mr. Weinstein. I commend Annabella for her willingness to take the stand and answer questions under oath. So I know that the defense just characterized the prosecution's new indictments as desperate. Obviously, that's their editorial opinion. I would not agree with that at all. I think it's important for all witnesses who may have relevant information to be permitted to testify. So my question is, why are they so afraid of having additional witnesses testify? If they think the prosecution has a weak case, then why don't they just let the witnesses testify and the jury can decide if it's a weak or strong case?
The start of his trial has been pushed back to January. A trial has opened in the Netherlands involving a 74-year-old woman who was euthanized 3 years ago, despite some indications she might have changed her mind. A nursing home doctor is accused of breaching the Dutch euthanasia law. The case aims to pinpoint what to do with dementia patients who have previously stated their wish to die under certain circumstances, but later might have second thoughts. It is the first such case since the Netherlands legalized euthanasia 17 years ago. Denmark's second largest city has come up with a different way to celebrate its history. It has unveiled new crossing signals that feature Vikings holding axes and shields. It's safe to cross the street in Aarhus when the green Viking is walking, but pedestrians have to stop when the red one is standing. Aarhus was founded by the Vikings in the 8th century. Well, it looks like we've got some sunshine coming our way. We'll take a look at the weather details coming right up. We had some clouds and showers in some areas of southwestern Alberta today, and a high of 19. Clear skies overnight, and dipping down to a chilly 3 degrees. Tomorrow, sunny and 24. Wednesday, sunshine and 26. A mix of sun and cloud on Thursday with a high of 22. And back to sunshine for the long weekend. Friday, 22 degrees, 27 for Saturday, and Sunday we should get to 25. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 24 degrees with an average low of 8. Highest temperature on the state was recorded in 1996 at 36 degrees. Our record low was only 2 degrees in 1980. Sunrise was at 6:37 this morning and sunset at 8:29. Let's see how tomorrow is shaping up across the country. It will be warm and sunny on the west coast, 28 in Victoria and 23 in Vancouver. Sunny also in Calgary with a high of 28 and a high of 23 in Edmonton. Regina will have a 30% chance of showers with a high of 19. Also a chance of showers in Saskatoon with a high of 20 degrees. In Winnipeg, rain and 15 degrees. More showers in Toronto with a high of 24. Increasing cloudiness in Ottawa with a high of 27. And Montreal, sunshine with a high of 26. Looks like skies will be clearing up in Fredericton with a high of 24 degrees, but a chance of showers in Halifax and 20 degrees. Periods of rain in Charlottetown with 18 as a high, and in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect rain and a high near 16 tomorrow. Stock markets on Bay and Wall Streets are getting a lift from U.S. President Donald Trump's claim that serious trade talks with China will begin soon. Stock markets were hammered on Friday after Trump fired out an angry tweet following China's announcement of new tariffs on American goods. After a half hour of trading, the Toronto market was up about 110 points and the Dow Jones Industrial Average was ahead about 220 points. China's retaliatory tariffs on U.S. seafood have seen Canada's lobster industry reap the benefits. Between January and June of last year, the U.S. shipped nearly 5.5 million kilograms of lobster to China, but has exported less than 1 million kilograms so far this year. Meantime, cargo planes are going to Halifax and Moncton to handle a big bump in Chinese lobster exports, close to 15 million kilograms this year, which is nearly as much as all of 2018. Toronto's local planning appeal tribunal has opened a hearing on the city's short-term rental market. City Council approved regulations for short-term rentals like listings on Airbnb at the start of last year, but they were appealed before they could be put in place. The regulations would restrict rentals to the owner's principal residence, require short-term renters to register with the city, and make them pay a 4% municipal accommodation tax. The rules are designed to limit the impact of short-term rentals on the availability of longer-term rental stock as major cities face tight rental markets. The Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development says a global attempt by more than 120 countries to find a way to more fairly tax global internet giants is moving ahead despite individual countries deciding to impose their own taxes. France introduced a 3% tax on digital companies that may be headquartered elsewhere but do billions of dollars in digital business such as advertising and retail in France. It says it will drop the idea if there's a solution in the OECD process, which aims for a result by the end of 2020. Now here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Lethbridge police have arrested a 29-year-old man in the drive-by paintball shooting at the city's supervised consumption site. Canadian families are spending far more on income taxes today than ever before, even exceeding what we pay for the everyday necessities of life. Jake Fuss with the Fraser Institute has the details next. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here is your Bridge City News community calendar. The 11th annual Care for Kids Golf Tournament is taking place Thursday, August 29th at Paradise Canyon Golf Resort, benefiting the Lethbridge Food Bank and the Canadian Tire Jumpstart Program. $20,000 of the proceeds will go directly to children in our community to help them participate in sport and activities. For details on how to take part as a player or sponsor, visit lethbridgefoodbank.ca. Get ready for a weekend of fun as Fort Whoop Up wraps up another successful summer season. The wrap-up begins Saturday, August 31st and runs through Labor Day, September 2nd. Enjoy great family fun with plenty of activities for all ages. Plus, on Sunday, September 1st, the Alberta Horse Artillery will be there. For more information on times and cost of admission, visit galtmuseum.com. The 2019 Flex Air Parkinson's Step in Stride fundraising walk is taking place Sunday, September 8th at Henderson Lake Park. Registration is at 1 p.m. with the walk beginning at 2. This is their largest fundraising event, and money raised goes to support services, education, and research that make every day better for those with Parkinson's disease and the people who care for them. To register and to donate, visit parkinsonsassociation.ca/stepinstride. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
A new study shows that the average Canadian family spent more than 44% of its income on taxes in 2018. That's a lot. Joining me now today to discuss this is Jake Fuss, a policy analyst with the independent think tank, the Fraser Institute. He's one of the co-authors of a new study called Taxes versus the Necessities of Life, the Canadian Consumer Tax Index 2019 edition, and he joins me now via Skype from Vancouver. Jake, welcome back to BCN.
Thanks very much for having me on.
Now, your study shows Canadians are spending more on taxes than on housing, food, clothing costs combined. Now, that seems pretty high. Can you explain how you came up with that 44% figure?
So our study measures the price the average family spends on taxes each year. And our goal is really to inform Canadians so they get a better sense of how much they pay in taxes. Now, it's probably not too difficult for the average person to calculate how much they pay in personal income taxes because we can look at our paychecks or pay stubs. But what's really difficult is looking at the other various taxes that we pay on top of that. So things like sales taxes, carbon taxes, and property taxes, and so forth. So what we try to do is add up all these taxes for the average family so they can get a better sense then. And as you mentioned, about 44% of our income is currently going to taxes, or almost $40,000 each year. So I think that's really important for people to understand.
So how much of a change is this compared to numbers, for, let's say, from 1961? How much did we spend on taxes compared to the basic necessities?
So that's a great question. So in 1961, since 1961, we've actually seen a considerable increase. So we've seen about an increase of about 2,200% or more in our tax bills since 1961. So it's been a considerable difference. And if we look back at 1961 as well, if we look at basic necessities, the average family used to spend about 57% of their income on basic necessities, while about $1 in every $3 went towards paying taxes. Now, if we fast forward to today, now what we see is that about 44% of our income is going to taxes, as I mentioned, whereas about 36% of our income is now going to basic necessities. So that amount has come down quite considerably, and we've had a flip here. So taxes are now consuming much more than basic necessities, and taxes are now the single largest expense for the average family.
So looking back to the 60s then, Jake, what was the average family income? It seems like a lot more families were able to survive on that one income.
So back in 1961, we had an average family income of about $5,000. If we compare that to today, it's now considerably higher at about $89,000. But I would point out again that back in 1961, even though the tax bill was lower, you still had about 57% of their income going to basic necessities. So it wasn't necessarily that much more affordable back then either.
Now, is some of this increase due to inflation?
Yes, so inflation does play a big role here. But even when we account for inflation, we still see that the tax bill has grown by about 176% since 1961 for the average family. So no matter how you slice it here, the tax bill has still risen quite considerably for the average family.
I understand that the tax rate has increased by a much higher rate compared to the increase of housing, clothing, and food costs. One would think that those rates of increases should remain fairly close to the tax increase rate. Can you explain the numbers and why we are seeing taxes increase so much faster?
Yeah, absolutely. So housing has risen quite substantially for expenditures for the average family since 1961 as well. So we've seen about a 1,600% increase in housing costs for the average family since 1961. And then similar numbers in food and clothing as well. We've seen about a 600% increase in food costs and about an 800% increase in clothing costs. So it is quite expensive. Now, in terms of why the tax bill has grown, there's a couple of factors here. The first thing is that incomes have been rising. So as incomes rise with our progressive income tax system, you're going to have a higher tax bill. So that's the first factor. The second thing, though, and the more important thing, though, is that tax rates have increased, and there have been a number of new taxes that have been introduced since then. Especially in recent years, we've seen things like carbon taxes, higher payroll taxes, removal of certain tax credits as well. So all of those things are going to act to increase your tax bill.
Jake, let's talk about the correlation between the cost of living versus rising income, especially from the 1960s through the 80s and into the 21st century, where we are today.
Yeah, so these have both been rising rapidly. Obviously, we've seen huge costs, cost of living being a number one concern for Canadians. There was a recent CBC News poll where they had cost of living as the number one concern for about a third of Canadians. And we've seen the cost of living, particularly in recent years, starting to rise. And I think important in this conversation of affordability and the cost of living is also the tax bill. So that's been rising quite substantially, particularly in recent years. So I think that's a really important factor here.
Now, Jake, when our governments continue to run deficit budgets, how does this really impact our personal tax burden?
Yeah, so that's another great question. So in terms of deficits here, when you run a deficit as a government, what you're really doing is passing the burden on to a future generation. So when you're incurring debt, what actually happens is that you have to raise taxes at a future date on a new generation in order to pay for that debt that you've incurred today. So when we factor this into our calculations, it actually raises the tax burden on families even more.
Now, economically speaking, in order to run balanced budgets and to pay off the accumulated government debt burden, what are the options to really accomplish this?
Yeah, so there's really two options when you're talking about balancing the budget. So the first thing is to raise taxes, and the second option is to reduce spending. So when you're talking about the first option of raising taxes, there's important negative economic consequences associated with that. So the second option of reducing spending is probably a more viable option. And when we look at things like healthcare and education in Canada, we know that we spend quite a considerable amount on healthcare and education. So there's really options here, and there's ways to deliver services at a more efficient rate at a lower cost to taxpayers. I'm particularly interested too to watch in Alberta. They have the Blue Ribbon Panel who's going to be reporting on state of government finances in Alberta. So I think that's something to definitely keep your eye out on.
Shelter and housing was a pretty high percentage point at 21 points. So how many people are not able to afford a house these days? Any thoughts on the real estate market and what could be done to maybe make houses more affordable?
Yeah, so absolutely. So some of my colleagues in the municipal policy department here have pointed out that governments typically only look at half the equation when we're talking about real estate. So they really only focus on the demand side, and that's unfortunate because we also really need to be paying attention to the supply side. So we need to be paying attention to things like regulatory processes, developer fees, reducing red tape for developers so that we can speed up and have more rapid approval times for construction and build more housing units. So I think it's really important to address the supply side rather than just half the equation.
Now, in your breakdown of the average Canadian family's expenditures as percentage of cash income, you have a category listed at 19.5%. What kinds of things are in that category?
Yeah, so this is sort of our miscellaneous category, or it's a catch-all item. So it's anything that's not basic necessities and taxes. So this can be things like household operations, pet expenses, transportation, childcare, entertainment, anything like that. So this one silver lining, though, in this category is that we've seen a considerable change since 1961 in that miscellaneous category. So families actually now have more income available to them now to spend. They have about twice the amount percentage-wise in income on miscellaneous items. So that is one definitely silver lining that we've seen.
Now let's go back to the 1960s here for a moment, Jake. How much did we spend on food in the 60s compared to today?
Yeah, so back in 1961, food cost the average family about $1,300 or about 25% of their income. So it's quite a considerable amount. That percentage has come down quite considerably since then. So it's now at about 11% of your income. So there has been a big change there.
Now what about clothing?
So clothing also has a similar story here. So it was roughly between 8 and 10% of your income, or around $500 before in 1961. And now it's come down quite considerably again in terms of your percentage of income. So now we're looking at about 4% or so of your income goes to clothing in 2018.
You know, I remember when I was a kid, I was 16 years old. I bought myself my first car, a 1973 Datsun 1800. I just had enough money, $1,000 to buy the car, but I didn't have enough money for the insurance, the registration, to put it on the road. So I had to wait another 2 months to put that on the road, right, to collect that money. Let's talk about vehicle ownership today. People have car payments, let's say $250, $300 a month. Then there's the insurance on that, the gas, the maintenance and so forth. That must have gone up exponentially as well.
Oh, absolutely. Especially this is something that we actually factor into our tax calculations. We look at like motor vehicle license fees. We look at, gas taxes as well. All of these things have gone up considerably. So that's certainly a big aspect of affordability for families. And that's also affordability in terms of your tax bill going to gas taxes and motor vehicle fees, which we include in those tax calculations. So it's definitely a consideration for families in terms of affordability.
Jake, it seems very clear that this rate of tax increase is simply unsustainable. Will we at some point get to a place where taxes will be, out of necessity, have to be rolled back perhaps to make it more affordable for families in Canada?
So this is something that we sort of indirectly address in our studies. So what we want to do is measure this in terms of the tax bill and inform Canadians so they get a better sense of their tax bill. But then what we want to do is say that it's now up to Canadians to decide whether they're getting good value for their tax dollars. And then they decide at what point that the taxes should be rolled back. So we really want to leave this up to Canadians.
So a lot of those tax dollars going to healthcare, education. What are you seeing in your study?
Yeah, absolutely. So healthcare and education are huge chunks of the provincial budgets, especially. This is going to eat up even more in the future as we have an aging population in Canada. So I think, going back to the Blue Ribbon panel in Alberta, I think that will be something for people in Lethbridge to pay particular attention to, because that's going to have huge implications moving forward for costs for the government. And it's going to have huge implications for taxes moving forward as well. So I think that's definitely something that people should keep their eye on.
So you're talking to Canadians right now about this study. Are they willing to fork out more for taxes? Because again, we're supporting healthcare and education and so forth. Or are Canadians getting frustrated and reaching out to maybe their MPs or their MLAs?
Yeah, I think it's great to get this conversation going, which is what we want to do with this study, because ultimately it is up to people to decide. So the reactions will evolve over time for sure. So that's definitely something that we'll be keeping our eye out on as we release this study each year.
And we've got a big election coming up October 21st. So taxes may play a role in this election here too as well. Jake Fuss, policy analyst with the Fraser Institute. Thanks a lot for joining me today from Vancouver.
Thanks very much for having me on.
Depression and anxiety are far too common today, but what are some of the solutions? To discuss this, I'm joined now by Dr. Sandra Wepler, Christian psychotherapist, ordained minister, producer of the Voice of Truth Prophetic TV, and she's also written the book called The Dubai Girl. Sandra, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you so much for having me, Hal. It's a pleasure and a real privilege and an honor.
Oh, you bet. Now, what is The Dubai Girl all about? Why don't you share with our viewers?
Yeah, the Dubai Girl, came out of, a real struggle with depression, anxiety, multiple panic attacks, and just freedom from walking into my destiny. It came out of a time where God was breaking me into and training me, into my destiny. Essentially, it started, when I was in Dubai, and I was going into. I was just driving out, going into the main road, and my accelerator got stuck. And essentially, I was accelerating coming on to, the main road, which had about an 18-wheeler. So that was some generational stuff as well with fear, and that kind of broke up and took away my freedom. What I was before that and what I was after that, I struggled for 30 years. I've been a psychotherapist. If anyone heard what my private struggles were, they would have never believed me if I had to tell them that I was struggling with multiple panic attacks, couldn't stay home, alone, couldn't go out alone, couldn't drive in the car alone after that, lost my job, lost tons of weight, and life is never the same for a long time after that.
So as you were dealing with a lot of this anxiety, God told you to write the book?
I kind of moved to Canada, did my master's. And then, when I did got a scholarship to do my doctorate. When I finished my doctorate in 2013, the dean of the university said to me, "You should turn this into a book." What really got me going is when my father, Michael D'Souza, passed away in 2013. See, he had greatness in him. He had an amazing destiny. He came from a very small town in India called Goa, and he had so much of greatness in him. He was an amazing man. Brought his entire family to Dubai. Went to Dubai when he was 29 in 1956. So essentially, for me, the book came out when I lost my father, and I felt like I had to make a connection with God the Father. And I felt like I'm going to take my father's inheritance here, his legacy, and I'm going to be the front runner to move forward and break through whatever call was on my dad. I'm going to break through the generational stuff that was on our family. And so the book came out, and I started I started changing, I would say, massaging the book, and then the book came out recently on just a couple of weeks ago.
So what were some of the biggest challenges you faced when you were writing the book? And apparently one day everything changed you, and it was a certain plane ride that actually impacted your life in a big way?
Yes. Yeah. I think God was already had some plans and purposes for me. He had his hand over my life. And, the challenges I had in the book was, to try to finish it with a proper testimony, because I hadn't received complete freedom. So I was not going to, be able to put an end of victory in this book. So I left the book as, that this is God's faithful, and no matter what I'm going through and I'm still struggling, I want to say to you guys that God is faithful. And I closed the book with that. And then I said to the Lord, I said, what do I do, Lord, with this? Because I want this book to get out, but I haven't received complete freedom. So how do I go about this? And, and I didn't know that very, very shortly God had a plan for total and complete freedom. My husband was going on a conference, an office conference to San Antonio, Texas, last year, September. I did not want to get on the plane. I have never got on a plane by myself alone. I had to go wire Atlanta and then back wire Salt Lake City. So the long and short of it is, I did, and I knew that something was going to change. I really didn't know what. But the miracle and the supernatural event that took place was when we were taxiing in the plane, and I realized that I was all alone, and I'd left my brother and my husband, everybody back at the Toronto airport. And now I'm on a U.S. flight going into U.S. in a Canadian airline, and I'm completely having multiple panic attacks, can't even see straight, can't breathe, can't focus. Everything is coming back to me. And then, the two people sitting at the side of me they knew something was happening, but they were trying to console me, but it wasn't happening. So at the end of the day, the plane plane takes off. And as I reach up, as the plane takes off and, just above the clouds, I heard a very, very clear voice that I've heard before, 7 years before, when I had a fear of flying. I heard a very clear voice that said, Sandra, this is your father. Look out. Look out. And, the father's voice is so clear because through all of the symptoms that I was having and everything in my body was shutting down, that one word, Sandra, I'm your father, look out, broke through all of the panic attacks, broke through the depressions and oppression and everything. And I looked out and this supernatural, miraculous peace came over me. And from that day onwards, it has completely broken and completely left my life.
Now, what about the title, The Dubai Girl itself? Why is that title so important for you?
Yeah, well, good question. Thank you so much for asking me that. I was praying about it and asking the Lord, what should I name this book? Because it was all about, destiny. It's about, pointing to the Father's heart and things like that. But really, I said, Lord, I know there are a lot of people who talk about, purpose and plan and destiny and call. So I was really leaning in and saying, what should I name it? And the Father said, name it The Dubai Girl, because that is where I met you. That is where you started your journey. That is where I called you. And that is where I called your dad. That is your beginnings. You conceived there. And, and my destiny started in your life then. So that's why, I named it The Dubai Girl, because at heart, I'm still a Dubai girl.
Now, your book is a combination of your personal story and provides practical help for people needing to experience their own breakthrough. So why did you think this was such an important message to share?
Yeah, it is important because people need to realize that sometimes they're struggling with depression, fear, anxiety. They're going through such hardships in life, yet there's a call on their life. Yet there is, I would say all hell is breaking loose, but yet God has a path and a purpose for them. And that they need to hang in there, and that they may think, why should I even write a book? Like, what is so special about me? But it's important because, people are going to hear your story and they're going to gain something from it, and their lives are going to be changed by your story. And as for me, I written the book because the book is pointing out to the Father's heart. We talk about, Jesus, we know he's compassionate. We talk about the Holy Spirit with power, but the Father is misunderstood many times. And so it became my mandate to talk about, the Father's heart and about, identity and about, how we can be sons and daughters. And no matter what happens, when God gives us a promise, he's going to deliver on it, despite what we see in the natural.
So, Sandra, how important is it really for us to know what our destiny is?
Mm-hmm. I think it's very, very, very important because others we're living a life that is just, Monday to Friday, wake up, sleep, get up. There is, God has, before time, he says, in Romans 8:23, that I have, formed you and shaped you, and I have a purpose and plan for you even before the earth began. So he has a purpose and plan and a destiny for each one of us here. And despite what is happening, this is what I always say, despite what is happening, lean into it, glean from what is going on. Don't give up, because I had a struggle for 30 years. I had suicidal thoughts. I kept thinking that, how can God, tell me that he's going to send me to nations, that he's going to, do all of these wonderful things with me, but there's no proof of it in the natural. So I think it's very, very important because God needs his people. He needs his agents here on earth to bring his kingdom from heaven here. And we are it.
Now, you say that mentors have been a key in your journey to experience your breakthrough and in the process of writing The Dubai Girl. How so?
Yeah, I've had some very key mentors. I want to mention that in the process of breaking through into your destiny, it's very, very important who you align with and who is in your corner. People like the one lady that actually, her name is Auntie Colleen White. I'd like to give her, she's passed away. I've known her for a very, very long time. She was instrumental in bringing me to Jesus. So, she was the reflection of what it is like to be intimately in love with Jesus. And she showed me that, she didn't only walk it out, but she instilled that. And then there's Dr. Rhonda Thomas. He's the VP of the Canada Christian College, who consistently loved on me as a father, even after my own father passed away. There's Joan Hunter, there's Robert Hodgkin and Doug Addison, and these guys, in my time of breaking through, they have stood by me. They never once questioned what my destiny, what my call is, or who I am. I've pretty much come out of left field, in the prophetic genre as well. So they have stood by me. They've loved on me, and they have believed in me, and helped me to propel forward. So it's very important, to have good, authentic prophetic leaders or ministers in your corner when you're breaking through into your destiny.
So how can a person find the right individual to mentor him or her? And does that mentor necessarily have to be a believer?
Well, I do believe that it has to be a believer, and especially if you're in a prophetic realm, then have somebody in the prophetic realm, a leader there to mentor you. If you're in healing, then have somebody who's in healing. If you're in deliverance, then have somebody, because you're going to walk through some stuff which you're not going to be able to understand. There's going to be no bandwidth for what you're going to walk through. And so you need those generals, who are ahead of you in the game, who have had that walk to have those brainstorming sessions and to say, don't get worried, don't get freaked out. This is normal. And so it is very important to have, and the quality, there has to be, I believe that I picked and I asked my mentors because they were in the same prophetic realm as I, but they had, the Lord, the Holy Spirit showed me, he showed me that these are people of highest integrity. They're very authentic, and they have love. Love is the biggest component, wisdom, because they've already walked the journey ahead of me, and love. Yeah.
So what is one key message you really hope people take away after reading your book?
The one key message I really want to talk about today, is just the love of the Father. Pointing out to the love of the Father, because the Father is, he is passionately, I always say this, one moment in his presence changes everything. And that's what happened to me. So he is passionately, extravagantly, and intentionally loving us unconditionally all the time. So if we, we don't make him, a source. We don't make him a resource. We don't make him a resource. Like an ATM machine. We get something from him and then we're off on our way into our destiny. No, but we actually make him the point of contact, the source. Because if we make him the source, then we partner with him and we do his work and his agenda on this earth, not ours. So that is the key thing. Understand your identity as a son and a daughter of the living God. And know that if you partner with him as the source, then you are going to walk. And that the third thing I would say is just believe and trust. Because if he has said something, it may take 20 years, it may take 30 years like me, but he will come through.
So who do you hope really reads your book?
I'm hoping that, my book is for Christians, but it's for non-Christians as well. It's for those people who really want to understand, who is God? What is his character like? Why is he love? Why is he grace? Why is he all these different things? Why is God shouting from the top of the mountaintop about his love, about, identity, about what that has to do with, call and purpose? There might be a lot of people in the marketplace, and there may be a lot of people in the church, and there may be a lot of people in the secular. But this is definitely not only for Christians. This is for those people who are looking at, why am I here? And who am I? And what should I actually be doing here?
All good questions, absolutely. Where can people go to connect with you, to learn more about you and the book, The Dubai Girl?
Yeah, well, they can go on my website, Hal, which is www.sandraweppler.com. They can also go to the Dubai Girl website. And we have a special promotion. I put it out on Facebook. And I said to them, my Facebook family and friends, I said to them, well, I'm giving you something for free. And I really meant that, because a lot of people use some corny things, but I meant that. I worked on a lot of resources, so 3 resources that they will get for free, which I worked for over 2-3 months to put in their hands. They can go to the Dubai Girl, so www.thedubaigirl.com, and they can sign up for that. They get a wonderful devotion for 30 days where the Father talks to them daily. They get 3 MP3s that talks about breakthrough, when I was breaking through, my personal breakthroughs. And they have another resource which will get them start to really focus and get them jump started into their destiny. And all of that can be found there. If they want to know more about me, they can go to Voice of Truth Prophetic TV International, where we're touching millions of people through Voice of Truth Prophetic TV. And they can also connect with us on all of our social media channels.
Dr. Sandra Wepler, author of The Dubai Girl, thanks a lot for joining me today from Kitchener, Ontario.
Thank you, Hal. Pleasure and honor.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.